So today's topic is the last one, and I have to admit right away that I am not an expert at helping people overcome loneliness. So the topic today is building meaningful relationships. So that is kind of the opposite of loneliness. And as I'm sure many of you have had this experience, when I started delving into it and I realized, oh my God, there is so much to explore and so much to talk about. So I went down rabbit holes and I haven't finished exploring yet. But my goal today is number one, I wasn't aware about the harmful effects of loneliness until I actually started reading all this. And I think of last year or the year before last, the US Surgeon General came up with a document, and that document is available freely on the internet. You can have take a look, where he talked about the harmful effects of loneliness, and it was not just because of COVID. COVID probably highlighted what was happening, with loneliness and people sheltering at home. But loneliness has been around for a long time. And one of the things that I found, of course, we know about the harmful effects of loneliness now because more people are talking about it. But as a physician, I never thought of, assessing for loneliness, looking at, how should I find out about loneliness until I started working on my course, Tiny Habits for Brain Health. I know some of you have bought that course and hopefully are using the principles and applying the course to your life. That was when I came across a huge body of research on loneliness, and now I'm finding out more and more about it. But again, I am not an expert. My goal is to bring it up today so that at least this is something you can look at and find ways on how we can overcome loneliness ourselves, if that is our problem, or we can help somebody else with loneliness, because I am sure all of us know somebody. And that is one of the strategies that I thought I should implement. I should go over all the people I know, maybe on my contact group, or, mm, any of the numerous groups I'm a part of, and find out, is there someone I haven't heard from in a while? And sometimes, as it happens, I'm sure many of you are part of, WhatsApp groups or some online groups, and you suddenly realize somebody hasn't been, taking part in discussions. And sometimes it's very easy to miss. And then you find out a few weeks later, he or she says, oh, I've been dealing with blah, 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 and we didn't even know. So a lot of different ways, and this is one area which needs a lot of exploration and help. So, mm, this I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And now, for those of you who have joined my webinars recently, don't worry if you have missed the previous ones. You're going to get a copy of the recording of every webinar in the past. So today's email, you'll receive today's recording as well as all the previous 7. And feel free to reach out to me on my clinic email address if you need any clarification, or you've missed something or something that stood out for you. And I'm happy to help. So today's is building meaningful relationships. All of them are interrelated, but and where should you start? So let us say you go through all these webinars, and that's a ton of information. And I don't think most of you don't need more and more information. So I will, at the end of this webinar, I'll talk about what is going to happen in the coming months, what I'm planning to launch, because I am planning to focus more on getting you to take action. So I'm a certified time. I'm so sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. I just assume all of you know me. So I'm Dr. Shabnam Das Kar. I'm a functional medicine doctor. I live in Alberta in Canada. My area of focus is brain health, and specifically, I want to focus more on hypertension from now on, because hypertension is a very big problem, and quite often it is not addressed the way it should be. And more importantly, hypertension can be treated quite well. We have good medications, and of course, there are a lot of lifestyle strategies. As you know, those of you who've heard me speak before, you know I talk more about lifestyle strategies, using supplements at therapeutic dosage, taking appropriate prescription medications. It is never either or. We need both. We need the right medications at the right dosage for the right duration. And along with that, we need all the different lifestyle changes. So, what happens with, now, first of all, of course, we need definitions. What is loneliness? Loneliness, and again, this is a very sciencey, medically sort of definition, because in, as you know, in research, we need to have clear definitions. So loneliness is the unpleasant experience, basically, when a person's network of social relationships is deficient in some important way. Here, what I want to highlight is, loneliness is basically a lack of meaningful, authentic connections. So the quality of our connections matter more than quantity. And in today's world of, social media and people having followers and thousands and millions of followers, many of them actually could be lonely as well. We don't know that. Now, for example, today's webinar, ideally, in the ideal world, I would love to sit down with all of you and have one-on-one chats. But, given I want to be conscious about privacy and all that, I don't even have this as a meeting. It's a webinar. But I would love to know each of you individually, because there is so much to know when we sit down one on one and have deep conversations. And if you look back to, let's say the last week, the interactions you've had, which were the ones that made you feel the best? Now, it's different things for different people. Like, my interests are, more sort of nerdy interests. So if I have an in-depth conversation about some topic like that, that excites me more, versus, as I have, mentioned many times before, I don't like, cooking, cleaning, and, all those things, the household chores. I am not into gardening. I don't have pets. So obviously, if someone's talking about their beautiful garden, I'm like, oh my God, you've put in a lot of work. But will I be interested in the best gardening practices? No. So the thing is, we all of us have to find sort of our tribe. And most of the time, our deep conversations are not usually as a group unless we interact on one. Now, social isolation refers to having a small number of social contacts. Now, the two are related, but at the same time, it's important to know that yes, if someone is socially isolated, doesn't meet a lot of people, their chances of being lonely are higher, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who has a lot of social contacts may also experience loneliness. This is something that people sometimes don't realize, because, oh, this one so and so lives with, all with his relatives or her relatives, and she has her kids and grandkids and everyone in her, living with her or living nearby, but maybe she doesn't have meaningful interactions with them because they are super busy. And it's not like a judgment on anyone, or this is what life has become now. I am originally from India. I grew up in a multi-family home, and we never knew about loneliness because no one was thinking about that. But we had what I used to call a more public life, because we rarely did things by ourselves. you know of course, I loved reading, so I used to spend more time reading books, and that is not something you can do as a together. But we didn't think of loneliness back then, because we were used to living in with a lot of other people in the same house, in the same sort of same location. So a person can be socially isolated or alone without feeling lonely. And I have a lot of friends who live by themselves, but they are not lonely because they have a lot of, they meet their kids, they meet their grandkids, they take their grandkids to, to the park and things like that, but they live alone. So that doesn't necessarily mean someone is lonely. Someone can feel lonely even when surrounded by others. The other thing is solitude. So, someone being alone by choice. So, these things are important to remember. Now, this is just Canadian statistics. That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't apply to other countries as well. There are similar statistics coming out from Australia, USA, and many other countries, where even the UK, where they have actually studied this. What I found quite shocking, but then, what happens is once you know something, then you realize, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's true. What I was shocked at is the amount of, the level of loneliness among the young people. And then because most of the time we feel that, okay, older people, it makes sense. They may be more lonely. Younger people, we associate them with, more socializing. They go out more. They have more options. But that's not necessarily true. And this is a very serious problem, of loneliness amongst the young people, because it is often we don't often know about it unless we are actually focused on looking for it. So loneliness has no age restriction. And what are the different factors that affect social isolation and or loneliness? So you can see here the list is very long, and different things apply to different people. Lack of a spouse or partner, yes, bereavement, divorce, migration, moving to a new country where you don't know enough people or you have problem with the language, you're not so comfortable using the language of that part of the world. Students, and not necessarily international students, for most students, many of them have moved out of the home for the first time. At home, they are like taken care of, parents are there for everything, but suddenly they find themselves in a new place. They are having to take care of themselves, find out where they're going to eat, and do laundry and a lot of things that for some people, it's for the first time in their life. They're doing a lot of stuff, cooking, and new mothers. I'm a former OBGY, and I was shocked to see the statistics. 61% of new mothers feel lonely. And it's like, when I think back, my son is 29 years old, but when I think back to the time soon after I had our son was born, I remembered I used to think, oh, that's just postpartum blues. But now I realize one of the things that changed was my identity, because I was not working. I was all not mostly, I was all the time at home. And I didn't think that. Now, on hindsight, I'm thinking, yeah, some of it must have. And loneliness, I was feeling lonely in the midst of, there was my mother-in-law and my parents and my husband, everyone around. But I still remember how I felt. This was so many years ago. So 61% of new mothers can feel lonely, and some countries don't have the option of mat leave. Some countries don't have, fathers don't get any leave. And that is something that I needs to be addressed. Of course, many people don't have the option of not working for long because of, financial problems, a lot of things. Social anxiety, this is very important amongst the young people. Poor sleep, of course, if you haven't slept well, and I've talked about sleep in one of the previous webinars. Loss of vision and hearing, this is in older adults. Loss of hearing can get in the way of having a good conversation. So for some people, solving their loneliness problem may be something relatively simple as getting hearing aids. Or if someone has, vision problems, they may not feel confident about going out and meeting people, or they may have problem recognizing someone else. And all these things get in the way of having meaningful conversations. Physical disabilities may, make them stay at home more. Financial hardships and social anxiety are two of the most important reasons. And again, it's different things for different people. Because of financial hardships, it is possible that, someone who is younger has more than one job. So working at two jobs and taking care of a family, where do they have time to have, meaningful conversations even on the phone? And sometimes financial hardships can get in the way of going and meeting people, because very often what happens is, unless you're meeting at home, where you go to a restaurant, enjoy a cup of coffee, that involves money. And if if you're using a car, it involves gas. If you are not using a car and you're using Uber or a taxi or whatever, that includes money as well. So as my son says, anything fun involves money. So it's, yes, there are ways of, maybe you can go to a park and walk in a park, which is free. So there are many different ways, but financial hardships do contribute to quite a bit, and social anxiety is another big one. Again, different things for different people, same things don't apply to everybody. Loneliness in young people is, I think this is something, all of us may have some young people we know very well, either our kids or nieces or nephews, or your neighbors or someone you know very well. This is actually, one study showed that the increased risk of depression and anxiety, the effects they lasted up to 9 years later. And sometimes this can be missed because, oh, young people are always on devices. They are forever, on social media and this and that. But it may be that they are trying to overcome their loneliness through that. So it's, using devices, using social media may be a way of coping. At the same time, sometimes it can make loneliness worse. Increased risk of, all these poor academic performance, higher probability of aggressive behavior. You can see all of these. And when someone has social anxiety or the challenges, in talking to people, telling them, you just need to go and meet more people is not going to solve that problem. So we have to find better solutions. Sorry. So loneliness in older people, now we know that, there are, older people have, anyway, they have a higher disease burden. But as you can see here, 50% increased risk of developing dementia if we are lonely. Hypertension and heart disease, high blood pressure, heart disease, these are some of the highest amount of risk. And this is like 45% increased risk of death because someone is lonely. And obviously, it's like, yes, we need optimal blood pressure, we need optimal blood glucose levels, we need low levels of inflammation. All those things are connected to loneliness. And very often, I am sure loneliness is not something most of us are really focused on. And as I said, as a doctor, of course, I studied medicine a long time ago. Back then, no one was talking about loneliness. Even today, loneliness is not, because it's not that doctors don't know and doctors don't care. They do. But the thing is, in a 15-minute conversation with your family doctor, when you go with blood glucose levels are high, your diabetes is not well controlled, your blood pressure is not well controlled, and you have pains and aches, how, where is the time left for the doctor to address, other issues? So that is one of the reasons where, I think we fall short in, number one, identifying loneliness, and number two, suggesting the right kind of strategies, because it's not, it's no one single thing that's going to help everybody. So what does loneliness do? So, loneliness, there are biological changes and there are behavioral changes. So, biological changes, immune dysfunction, higher inflammation. Fibrinogen is you can test your blood fibrinogen levels. It increases coagulation, it increases clotting. You don't want your blood to clot more than necessary. Yes, we do need some amount of clotting, because otherwise, even from a minor injury, we'll all bleed to death. But we need our blood to be more fluid, and higher fibrinogen levels are related to higher risk for heart disease, stroke, and dementias. Chronic stress response. So, loneliness can create a background chronic stress response. And I've talked about stress response earlier. Changes in gene expression. And the gut microbiome effects are very interesting. So, they did a study where they looked at couples who were living together and also people who were not together. And they found that the gut microbiome in people living together in the same house were more alike than different. And it had a definitive picture where, of course, if it's a couple living together, their chances of their loneliness are less. And again, I'm not saying it's zero, because sometimes couples may not be, in a very meaningful relationship for various reasons. But what was interesting in the gut microbiome study is they found that we know that, food has one of the biggest impacts on gut microbiome. And obviously, if a couple is living together in the same house, very likely they eat similar stuff, may not be the exact same food. But what they found is this was even when they controlled for the food that people were eating, there was still a difference in those who were living together and not feeling lonely versus those who were feeling lonely. So this is again very interesting. Of course, unhealthy behaviors, nothing new in that. Someone who's lonely is more at risk for doing all these things. Sometimes some people use alcohol or substance abuse to overcome their feeling of loneliness. And some of the times people haven't been able to identify their problems clearly. So all those problems, all those these are sort of what are things happening in the background. Behaviors sometimes we may say are easier to control, but people need the right methods. I mean, all of us know we need to eat better and we need to move more and sit less and exercise at higher intensities. But why is it that most of us struggle to do that? I know some of you are highly disciplined and you can do very well, and you are physically active and you're hiking and biking and doing all going to the gym regularly. But there are a lot of people like me who for whom like exercising is something I have to really deliberately focus on. So that is what my subsequent programs, I want to focus more on the behavior change aspect, because I am trained as a tiny habits coach and also in fog behavior design. So my opinion is we know that we have to make all these wonderful changes, but most of us don't have access to the right tools. And it's very easy for us to say, oh, so and so is just lazy. It's not motivated to do that. Maybe you're saying that about yourself. Like, oh, I don't feel motivated to do anything. Motivation is not a reliable method. So that is why I'm more excited about the behavior change and behavior design programs, because those have definitely have a potential to help us and you much better than just giving you tons and tons of information. I think we all of us have enough information today. We are drowning in information. So how do we measure loneliness? Now this is a very well known tool. It's a long list of 20 questions, and you can just do an internet search for the scale. But here is my problem. Now this has been used in a lot of research studies. Let us say your doctor decides, I'm going to focus on loneliness and I'm going to screen my patients for loneliness. So if your doctor doesn't have this way where they can send you the questionnaire ahead of time and you fill it up in your time at home, and then the doctor gets to see the report, versus you go to the doctor's clinic, you have this short window of time and the doctor tells you, oh, you need to fill this up. It's a 20 questions in a questionnaire. How often do you think that is going to happen? So what happened is everyone realizes, and this is not just the loneliness scale, there are numerous other scales. Obviously, when we have more information, we have better quality assessment, but sometimes we have to sacrifice in a longer questionnaires for something shorter. So this is one that came up from the 3-item loneliness scale, and I'm going to keep it on the screen for a little while because I want each of you to assess yourself on this scale. Now you don't have to share what you find about yourself, but just go over this and see what applies to you. And you can see the sum total. So the maximum score of 9, higher scores indicate greater loneliness. So I'm going to pause there and keep it on Soon as the minute is over, I'll let you know. So let me grab my phone. Okay. So I don't need you to share what you found out about yourself, but this is something that, if you found that your loneliness score is high, maybe that is an area you need to address. And again, like I said, I don't have simple, easy solutions for everyone because each person's loneliness is different. So, what are the different ways to overcome loneliness? These are a whole lot of public health measures. There is a minister of loneliness in the UK, and I think in Australia as well. I don't think Canada or the US has one. In Canada, this was supposed to be one of the very successful campaigns where they do you know your neighbor? So getting the neighborhood to participate in a bunch of stuff. But again, like I said, it depends on why are why are you lonely? Like if I'm lonely because I have social anxiety, I don't want to go out and meet people, I am not going to take part in however many programs there might be. Now, in China, they came up with this filial piety law. It is care for your parents or suffer public shaming and desecrate your credit scores. Now, this particular program did not work very well because obviously your kids don't show up and don't meet you often. Are you going to file a case against them? So, what happened is this was like, I don't know who came up with this idea now. They thought this would work. It's like they found that a few parents did file cases against their kids for not meeting them often enough and not maintaining relationships. But most of those cases were, settled out of court. So this, of course, does not work very well. Singapore has something very interesting where they provide discounted housing for young adults who want to buy a house near their parents' place, or so that parents and grandparents and all can have a wonderful relationship because of proximity. Obviously, if your kids and grandkids are living nearby, chances are higher that you're going to meet them more often versus if they are living in different. But Singapore is a small country, so they could do that very well. But the thing is, our environment decides so much about our health, and that is one of the most important things we need to keep in mind. So I kind of paraphrased famous lines from the movie Anna Karenina, where socially connected people are alike, but a lonely person is lonely in his or her own way. Now, the original quote was about happy families and unhappy families. So, first of all, so public health stuff are very important and very necessary. So, recently, a lot of people have been coming up with something called social prescribing. So, a doctor finds out his or her patient has loneliness, is feeling alone because of recent bereavement or whatever reasons, and they can prescribe things. So once they prescribe, the assumption is patients will follow through, or at least someone else will pay for some of that stuff. Now, yes, it does work for a lot of people, but again, like I said, if loneliness is something very individual and it needs a very individual approach. These are two books, like I said, I went down multiple rabbit holes. So these are two books I started reading. I didn't finish them. I was very surprised to come across an entire body of literature on how we can measure wisdom. Who knew we could measure wisdom? So Dr. Jeste is a geriatric psychiatrist, and his book is, I think it's about 800 pages. I haven't reached far enough. He describes a whole bunch of strategies, and there is a questionnaire which it's available freely on the internet to find out how wise you are. And I asked Dr. Jeste on LinkedIn, I am doing a self-assessment. I'm sure there is a very high risk of, considering myself more wise than I am. So he said, yeah, ideally, you need to do the self-assessment and you need to ask a close, a friend or a relative or someone who knows you well to do the same assessment on you and see whether, how much the two match. But you'll understand once I tell you what some of the questions are. The art and science of connection, she has a whole bunch of strategies as well. Everyone comes up with strategies, and like I said, find out what applies. These are two books. I'm sure there are a lot of other books which I haven't gone into yet. A few I found are more prescriptive, and as you know, prescriptive things don't always work. Like I said, sending me to a gardening event is not going to work. So it's different things for different people. And so the wisdom, the entire wisdom literature really had me fascinated. So wisdom, sometimes, with age comes wisdom, but sometimes age comes alone, and we know that, don't we? So this is the San Diego Wisdom Scale that Dr. Jeste and his group came up with. And here again, once you read, what is included in the wisdom scale, you will understand that empathy and compassion, emotional self-regulation, self-reflection, the ability to think inwardly, and sometimes we, because of our busy life and all the things that we are dealing with, we don't set aside time for self reflection. Maybe this is something some of us maybe do it on a regular basis. I definitely don't set aside time for self reflection, but my time of meditation is a time when I think that is when I still my mind. So I find that my thoughts are much better when the inner chatter is quieter. And I won't say that it's the same every day. I know many of you in this group, in the audience, are long-term meditators, and I consider meditation and mindfulness one of my superpowers. I've been meditating for a long time. Accepting uncertainty and diversity of perspectives, decisiveness, spirituality, all these are the different parts of the wisdom scale. And I will probably send a link to the wisdom scale, and you can do your own assessment and see where you are. And you can have another person do the assessment for you and see how well you measure. I have done my own, but I haven't asked someone else to assess me on this scale yet. So that was when I thought maybe I might not be as wise as I think I am. So what are the different strategies? Like I said, there's nothing, there is no one solution for everybody. But one thing I found is, cognitive behavioral therapy. Again, this is therapy provided by a psychologist to get rid of automatic negative thoughts. Maybe it's negative thoughts that get in the way of our communicating with other people. I could be someone who's bothered by what will people think about me? Will I be accepted? Will they think I'm an idiot? Or will they find that, whatever I have to say is very interesting? Social prescribing is something else I talked about. So good vocabulary was something very surprising. But then, on the other hand, when you think about it, it's probably not as surprising, because if you have read Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, that was when I realized, oh my God, being able to identify some of our emotions and being able to use the right words have a huge impact on how, number one, how we can communicate with the other people, and obvious. And on the other hand, it's also explaining how I feel. Once I can identify exactly what I'm feeling, am I feeling anxious because, I'm worried about something that's going to happen tomorrow? I have a deadline and I haven't done much with it. Or is it that I haven't slept well last night? So that's the reason I'm feeling more anxious. So obviously, if I haven't slept well last night, I need to figure out, why didn't I sleep well last night? Did I eat too late into the night? Did I not walk outside enough? Did I not get enough daylight exposure? Again, self reflection and finding out and having the right words to describe what is going on. Is it anxiety which is temporary, or is it anxiety that is disabling? Those are the things we need to identify. Empathy, of course, has a huge impact on so many areas. And these are not things I hope they are being taught in med schools today. I studied medicine a long time ago. None of this was a part of, like, we didn't study about mindfulness or, stress reduction techniques. Stress, actually, when I was in med school, wasn't something so important to deal with. We didn't even ask patients about their stress levels. Then there are digital tools, and as you know, I am a techno optimist. So Replica is an app which I downloaded the app. I didn't opt for the pro version. You can see, you can download it for yourself, check the free version and see. Sometimes there are harms that we have to be careful about, particularly for younger people. So apparently Replica started sending them inappropriate stuff on one study they found. This is again, Plus Connect is a research tool. LEQ is a device, and if you go to their website, you will see many of these older ladies. One lady said it's a small device, and you can, it's not very difficult to handle it, and it's so LEQ. So this lady was saying, when she goes out, she walked her dog and she came back, and she lives alone by herself. She said she felt very good when the device told her, "So how are you doing today? How's your walk?" So yes, we would love to have, in-person connections all the time. But what if you don't always have that option? So there is this entire world of new, age tech, as they call it. So maybe we're going to have down the line, and I sure hope it comes soon rather than late, sooner rather than later, where we'll have these robots which can help us in day-to-day living and also be a companion. Yes, that is probably not ideal. And many people are going to say, "Oh, what is she talking about? We are talking about having more human to human interaction." And here she is talking about digital technologies. It's different things for different people. Let us say a person doesn't have anybody they can communicate with on a regular basis. So what if a digital, tool like an LEQ or something else, or some AI? Apparently, a lot of people younger people are using AI tools. So Mino is something it's a company that was founded by the co-founder of Bumble. So those of you who, you're probably, many of you are familiar with Bumble. That's a sort of a dating app. And people are using Mino for even us finding out, how should I respond to, a certain situation. And many people have found that helpful. A friend of mine was talking about how a couple was using Chat GPT to have a better fight on texting. So she would ask ChatGPT, "How should I respond? This is what my husband said about blah, 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 blah." And again, this is not a case control study, this is just anecdotal. This lady felt her responses were better to what her husband was trying to tell her, and their fight was better. It was resolved earlier. So, we have to keep an open mind. There is no one perfect solution for everybody. I think that's all. And please feel free to ask your questions. I'm going to stop recording because I want to maintain your privacy. If you have any questions, you can either type in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. You will be heard but not seen. So you can raise your hand even if you're in your pajamas. So I'm going to stop the recording. And